Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm excited to share the story of my recent trip to Japan. And one of the things I wanted to do on this trip is to go watch hunting, to explore one of the most vibrant watch markets in the world, and of course, to potentially add a couple of new pieces to my collection. Spoiler alert, I didn't come back empty-handed. Japan has always fascinated me, and not just for its rich culture, amazing food, and beautiful landscapes. The watch scene there is unparalleled. Nowhere else in the world, not even in Switzerland, have I seen such a vibrant market. Their secondary market offers everything from luxury brands to affordable treasures, as well as vintage pieces from around the world. My approach was simple. I wasn't just going to buy a watch on a whim. I've learned my lesson from my past impulsive watch purchases. For this trip, I had a short list of brands and watches in my mind. Grand Seiko, Vintage Grand Seiko, Citizen from the Citizen line, IWC, Vintage Omega, and Japanese micro brands. I also plan to sell 2 watches from my collection to help fund my purchases. My Laco, which I almost never wear, and my Bulgari Diagonal. The Laco was an impulsive buy, and the Bulgari, while a gift from my dad, doesn't get the wrist time it deserves. My first stop was the Quo store in Kyoto. The moment I walked in, the display was striking. I don't know whether it was the lighting in the showroom, but the dials shined beautifully, and Quo really nails that retro 60s look. The finishing on these watches was impressive, and from the short time I spent inspecting the watches, they felt solid and well crafted. But here's the thing, while the Quo Oldsmith would definitely remind me of my Japan trip, it didn't feel like the watch for me. It felt more like a souvenir than a true timepiece, and I wanted something more special, something I'd want to keep in my collection for a long time. Don't get me wrong, the Quo is a fantastic watch on its own. Honestly, if I had been sitting at my computer back home, I might have just ordered one online without a second thought. But perhaps it was the vibe in the store. I felt like many customers were treating these as keepsakes rather than serious horological pieces, so I decided to move on. Also in Kyoto, right around the corner from Quo was Not, a watch brand I haven't heard a lot about. The store was small, but the watches were displayed nicely in sections. The watches themselves were well designed, with clean lines and a certain charm that in some ways reminded me of the Nomos brand. That said, the watches just didn't speak to me. There was nothing wrong with them, but to me they were average pieces, and I didn't feel the spark or connection that I look for when adding a new watch to my collection. So after spending some time at the store, it was time to move on. On my last day in Kyoto, I stumbled upon a watch store called Moonwatch. At the center display, there was a very decent selection of Rolex watches gleaming under the lights. And along the walls, all the other Swiss luxury watch brands were carefully organized in their own sections, each display perfectly curated. After spending some time closely inspecting the watches behind the glass, I found myself in a familiar conundrum. It was a situation reminiscent of a few years ago, when I was torn between the IWC Mark 18 and the IWC Pilot chronograph. This time, the contenders were the IWC Pilot Mark 20 and the Portugueser 40 small seconds. Moonwatch had both, and they looked brand new, pristine in every sense. I spent a while weighing my options, inspecting each piece through a loupe, trying them on, and admiring the details. In the end though, the Portugueser won me over. There's something about this watch, maybe its timeless design, that resonated with me. After much deliberation, I decided to go for it. Of course, I won't dive into the nitty-gritty details of why I think the Portugueser is the better watch in this video. But stay tuned for a dedicated review where I'll break it all down for you. What I will say is this, I hadn't even made it to Tokyo yet, and here I was, already dropping some serious coin on an IWC. But when a watch speaks to you, sometimes you just have to listen. In Tokyo, I had to stop by the Kurono Tokyo showroom, and I have to say, the experience was fantastic. They had all the Kurono Tokyo watch models on display, and while none were for sale, understandably since they only sell online, they were kind enough to let me try any of the watches I wanted. With the brief time I spent with the watches, one thing immediately stood out. the dial designs. The level of detail is undeniable, and they are truly exceptional for a micro brand. Each dial felt like a piece of art, and it's clear a lot of thought goes into creating these designs. The cases, while nicely polished, didn't leave quite the same impression, but I couldn't help but feel they lacked that extra refinement. Personally, I prefer a combination of polished and brushed surfaces, especially on a sports watch. It gives the piece more dimension and versatility. That also got me thinking about the value proposition of Chrono Tokyo watches. They're powered by Seiko and Miura movements, and while these are reliable and well regarded, it does raise the question of whether the price is justified. Off the top of my head, I can think of a few brands that are using the same movements, but selling at less than half the price. But I'm veering off topic here, and this is a discussion better saved for another video. Overall, the visit was insightful, and it's always great to handle watches in person to fully appreciate their strengths and nuances. Beyond that, I didn't spend much time hopping around to other watch stores. After burning a big chunk of cash on the IWC Portugueser back in Kyoto, there was no way I could justify buying anything else of significant value on this trip. Instead, I decided to take a different approach and visited the Seiko Museum. It was an incredible experience, and to my surprise, I had the place entirely to myself. Walking through the museum was like stepping into a time capsule, tracing Seiko's history from its humble beginnings to its status as a horological powerhouse. When I reached the Grand Seiko movement lineup, I was completely captivated. Seeing the intricacies of their calibers up close was fascinating, and I honestly just wanted to sit there and admire the craftsmanship for hours. With some extra time to burn, I made a quick stop at the Grand Seiko flagship store in Ginza, specifically to check out the new SLGW005. Grand Seiko did an impressive job with this piece. It's a faithful homage of the original 44GS, and the design truly captures the essence of that classic model. And I wanted to check it out up close. The sales staff, while friendly, were noticeably eager to make a sale. But for me, this visit wasn't about buying. It was about appreciating the watch up close. Had a brief but pleasant chat with the clerk, and ultimately walked away content with the experience but without the watch. I had a similar experience at the Citizen flagship store. Getting to see and handle the watches from the Citizen collection all under one roof was a treat. It was a great opportunity to admire some of the best quartz watches made in the world today. The conversion rate between the US dollar and Japanese yen made the prices for flagship models surprisingly reasonable. And I was so tempted to add a Citizen Eco Drive watch to my collection. That said, I still had an itch to peruse some vintage pieces, specifically from Rolex, Omega, and of course Grand Seiko. And the perfect place to do that in Tokyo? Nakano Broadway, home to some legendary second-hand watch shops like Jack Road and Betty, Fire Kids, and Kamekichi. It's a treasure trove for vintage watch enthusiasts, with a bit of everything for collectors. It's overwhelming in the best way possible, but this is where having a clear plan pays off. Without one, you can spend hours going through their inventory. At Nakano, I was tempted by a few pieces, but nothing quite hit that perfect note yet. Unfortunately, I didn't find any vintage Omega Constellation watches or the vintage Seikos I was looking for. Then, a trio of vintage Grand Seiko watches immediately caught my eye. The clerk noticed my interest, carefully picked all three from the display, and ushered me into a private room for a closer look. A nice touch that really elevated the experience. After spending some time admiring these remarkable pieces from Grand Seiko and deliberating over which one to choose, I ultimately decided to go with the 4645A, a Grand Seiko with that legendary 44GS case. It's not the most sought after of vintage Grand Seikos, but this piece had been masterfully restored, looking every bit like a brand new watch from this decade, yet still retaining its timeless charm. It felt like the perfect blend of heritage and modernity, and I couldn't be happier with my decision. It was the perfect way to end my watch hunt and wrap up an unforgettable trip to Japan, bringing home not just a Grand Seiko, but a piece of history that will always remind me of this vacation. As for the watches I planned to sell, I managed to part ways with the Laco. The money I got from it went toward funding part of my Grand Seiko purchase. It was a good time to let that one go. And if you're curious about why I decided to sell it, check out my video review of the Laco, which I'll link below. As for the Bulgari, the only offer I received was far from reasonable, so I decided to hold on to it. I was hoping to sell it, but sometimes things don't go as planned. You win some, you lose some. So there you have it, my watch hunting adventure in Japan. I'm thrilled with the IWC Portugieser and the vintage Grand Seiko. These are not just watches, they're pieces of an incredible trip that I'll carry with me every day. Stay tuned for dedicated reviews of these watches here on the channel. And if you're considering a trip to Japan to go watch shopping, I highly recommend it. The market is vibrant, the selection is unmatched, and the people's passion for watches is truly inspiring. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. I wish you the best in your watch wearing journey, and I'll see you in the next one.